Hey there, if you're managing a customer service team, a customer journey team, or a sales team, and you're trying to grow your current operations, you're probably wondering the same question everyone does. How many agents do I really need? Believe it or not, many companies, they don't know how to pull this off, and they end up bleeding their company out of money by overhiring, or worse, underhiring, and frustrating their customers, worsening their customer retention efforts, and burning out their agents, causing more attrition and agent turnover. So today, we're going to dive into a 5-step framework that I'm going to give you that will allow you to calculate how many agents your current operation actually needs. We're going to start with number 1, which is forecasting, which is the calculations to predict the number of interactions you'll have. You can call it emails, you can call it chat, you can call it phone calls. Every single one of these interactions needs to be forecasted and predicted based on historical information and future inputs to be able to be accurate on the number of agents you need. Then we're going to translate this into requirements. The requirements are how many agents you need per interval times. The intervals are usually measured in 30-minute intervals or 1-hour intervals. Calculating this is crucial so that you know how many agents you need at every moment of the day to be successful. Then you'll need to translate this into schedules so that you know how many shifts you need and how many agents you need. Why? Because you need to predict the number of breaks, lunches, coaching time, training times that you'll need to input into your current operations to ensure you're efficient. Then real-time analysis. The real-time analysis is simply monitoring that every single agent is following their schedules so that they're able to be there when they're needed. Finally, reporting. Reporting is one of the crucial parts of this entire framework because it allows you to measure the efficiency and effectiveness of your current calculations, and we will tell you if you need to adjust anything. Let's start with forecasting. It's the foundation of everything. Think of forecasting as your best educated guess, backed up by data. How many interactions you'll get in a given period of time. But this isn't just talking about how many calls you get on a typical Tuesday. It's actually measuring the volume of calls or interactions you get on every single interval of your week, your month, and your year. Because seasonality does create an impact, and also business drivers such as marketing campaigns, product launches, billing cycles, holidays, etc. All of this can skew your volume. So that's why it's very important for you to keep track of all the number of calls you get and at the time when you're actually getting it, so that you're able to do something like a 4-week rolling average or a regression line or a trend line to identify the number of calls you're going to get on every single 30-minute interval. Also, you need to identify what impact your marketing activities create on your regular volume. For example, let's say on a typical Tuesday, you get 200 calls. However, whenever you do a marketing campaign for sales, it increases your volume in 20%. So you need to keep track of this variable so that you can input that on top of your 4-week rolling average to determine the volume that you can get. Also, if your business thrives on seasonality, for example, if you're in the retail industry, chances are that for Thanksgiving or for December, you're going to get an increase in sales. So you need to calculate what typically is the increase. Is it 30%, 20%, 25%? And then grab this information and input it into your data so that you're able to predict how many calls you're going to get in that high season or even in that low season. If, for example, your operation is not related to sales, but it's related to customer service, and you're selling a product and you deliver it, let's say at the end of every month, then you can expect an increase in the volume at the beginnings of the next month, which is when you're going to get customer service increase. So analyzing your business will not just go on an interval level, but also seasonality level, business driver level, and even business decision. Or even if it's a merge or an acquisition for another company, this will impact the overall volume that you're getting. Another thing that you need to track is your forecast accuracy. You always need to evaluate if your forecast versus the actual volume of calls that you're getting is close enough. How much is close enough? Between 5 to 10%. If you're consistently above 10%, either understaffing or overstaffing, then you need to reconsider what calculations are you inputting in your forecast. Because otherwise, you're going to be overhiring or underhiring, not because your staffing calculations were wrong, but because your entire forecast was wrong. This is an example of a weekly calculation. In this graph, very simple graph, we have the volume of calls that we're expected to have on a given week. Here, we're going to calculate that we're going to get 2,500 interactions in a given week, and your Sundays represents 4.52% of it, while your Mondays is 17.83% of it, And finally, your salaries are 11.24% of this. Keeping this in mind is crucial for your business because it will allow you to determine how many agents you'll need to schedule on each weekday. But then you gotta take it to the next level, which is calculating what percentage of calls you're gonna get on every single interval of time for a particular day. So for example, if on a Monday you're expecting to receive 500 calls, then you'll need to know what percentage of calls will fall under each interval. This way, you'll be able to tell when you're gonna need more agents and when you're gonna need less agents. This is very crucial as well, because going back to the example that if you live in the e-commerce world and all the deliveries occur in the morning, you can expect customer service calls to peak at afternoons. If you have a promotion on your sales queue, and let's say you're throwing a promotion for everyone that buys within the first 4 hours of the day, then you can expect an increase in the volume of your sales queue in the mornings. But to be able to grab these percentages and inputting it into your data, you'll need to have a grid that looks a little bit like this, that will show you the percentages per interval of time. Preferably, you can do it for 30 minutes, but if you want to be more detailed, you can even do it for 15 minutes. So now that you have calculated your forecast and you have a pretty good estimate of how many calls you're going to get tomorrow, for example, let's say you're going to get around 1,000 calls. And you already know that at 8 a.m., your chances are you're just going to get around 10 calls. But then as you get closer to noon, the number of calls will increase. And then as you get closer to the end of the day, the number of calls will decrease. Then you already have most of the information you need to calculate how many agents you need on every single interval. But there are additional 4 elements that you need to keep into consideration. One, it's the length of each call, or what we call average handle time. This is important because it will tell you how long your agent will be busy with every single interaction. Then, speed of answer. The speed of answer is how fast you want your agents to be able to get to that call. The smaller the time, the higher chances you have of actually interacting with the person before they drop in the call. And when a customer actually drops a call, or when a lead drops a call and decide not to wait anymore, you have a problem. Because every time a client hangs up the phone, they're unsatisfied. They're already your clients. And worse, if they're your lead, chances are they're not going to go with you because they don't want to wait so long. So it's very important that you define how fast you want this and how efficient you want it. For example, for a sales queue, the recommended is 20 seconds, while for a customer service queue, it can go from 30 seconds to 45 seconds. Then you want your service level. The service level is the percentage of calls you want to meet this criteria with. For example, 85% of the calls, I want them to be answered within 20 seconds, or 70% of the calls. So the higher your service level, the less efficient you are, but then the faster you also become, and the faster you're going to get to your customer. So this is a strategic decision that your company needs to take to determine how fast you want it to be and how efficient you want it to be. Once you have all this information, you got to plug it into an Erlang-C formula. The Erlang-C formula tells you how many agents you need given your average speed of answer, your average handle time, your service level agreement, and then there's a 4th element, which is your shrinkage. The shrinkage is all the time that you plan, but chances are not everyone's going to be there. So for example, let's say you hire 10 agents, chances are one of them are going to be absent. It's going to be absent. Another one could be in training, could be in coaching, could be in break, or could be experiencing system issues. So your shrinkage needs to be all the unproductive time that may occur, but you don't really know when it's going to occur. Industry standards goes around 25% to 35%. So once you have all this, you get to plug it into a calculator. For your convenience, we have a calculator in our website. Simply go to uplinkbpo.com, complimentary services, staffing calculator. After filling up a form, you'll gain access to a staffing calculator where you'll be able to input all the information for one particular interval, and they'll tell you how many agents you actually need. Now I'm going to show you a grid in Excel. What you can see in this Excel spreadsheet is a breakdown of the forecast data. For example, this is the week of July the 5th, and this is the day of July the 2nd. If you see, we have 15 minutes intervals. Within each 15-minute interval, we have a forecast of how many calls we expect to receive, and then we have the shrinkage that we're planning for that particular interval. Then we have the service level, which is 85% for this example, and 30 seconds service time, which is how fast you want the calls to be answered, and then your average handle time or the length of the call. Finally, you have the max wait time. The max wait time is how long you believe a customer will wait before hanging up the phone. You can calculate this by obtaining it from your historical data. The airline C calculation doesn't really come on an Excel spreadsheet. This is a customized grade that we did with JavaScript to be able to calculate how many agents we actually need. And for this particular example, on July 2nd at 10:15 a.m., we expect to receive 15 calls. And again, we want 85% of the calls to be answered within 30 seconds, and each one of these calls will be 330 seconds in average, and people will wait up to a max of 60 seconds before dropping. With these calculations, I can tell you that you'll need around 9 agents to be able to handle these calls. But because of shrinkage, you'll need around 14 agents because of absenteeism, system issues, training, etc. And you'll need to hire around 14 agents and plan 14 agents to actually have 9 to be able to meet this criteria. The calculation for the abandon rate in this calculation is 0. But as you become more strict with your service time, then your abandon rate will decrease. But if you become more permissible with it, let's say you don't want to leave it up to 30 seconds, you want to leave it up to 45 seconds or 60 seconds, and you decrease your service level time to 60%, then your abandon rate will go up. So this is a decision that your company needs to make. For example, if it's a sales queue, then what's the revenue that you could get per every lead that you're able to close? So let's say it's $30 only per lead. Then based on that, you can calculate how many calls you're willing to leave on the table, how many leads you're willing to lose to be efficient on the number of agents you actually need. If you want to get access to this, you can email us, and then we're going to be more than glad to send you a particular copy of this with dummy data so that you know how to calculate your staffing needs. So now that you have calculated how many agents you need for every single interval, but how do you actually turn this into shifts and schedule for your agents? Well, this is where scheduling comes in. The scheduling is about transforming your staffing requirements into real agent shifts. For example, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., 10 p.m. to 7 p.m., etc. Well, there's a lot of factors that are going to play a role in this. Number one, it's the country where you're hiring. If it's in the United States, it's around 40 hours per week. If it's in Latin America, you can go from 48 hours per week to 42 hours per week. Then most companies make this mistake. Once they have the beautiful requirements with all the number of agents they need per every single interval, they just fill it with generic schedule, 9 to 5, for example. But this really doesn't work, because if you're covering a large hour operation, then you're going to face several issues. One, you might need 10 agents, let's say from 8 a.m. to 8:30, but then you only need 5 from 8:30 to 9, and then you may need 20 from 9 to 9:30. Reality is this occurs a lot, mainly because people often perform calls before their shift starts, let's say from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then once their shift begins at their job, they're going to be too busy. They're not going to be able to keep on calling. So there's going to be a decrease in the volume of calls. Then we'll spike out again around noon. And then as people finish their work duties, when they go home or when they're driving home, usually they do some of the calls they also need to perform. So around 5 p.m., you're going to see an increase. And then if you perform services for multiple time zones, then all of this will stagger one on top of the other one and will create a crazy variation through the day. All this variation could create a lot of inefficiencies in your schedule. So it's very important to use a tool that allows you to visualize what are your requirements per day and what are the shifts you have, so that you can calculate how many agents you'll have on every single interval time. And here's where you start playing with breaks and lunches. For example, if you have a grid of around 20 agents, probably not the 20 of them will be able to take lunch simultaneously. Some of them will gotta take it at 11, some of them will take it at 11:30, and some of them will take it around 12. Using this will allow you to make the most efficient schedule strategies for you to be able to meet the requirements. You can use a simple spreadsheet where you add all the requirements that you have per day and then all the shifts and simply play with it. Or you can use scheduling tools that are available out there. I'm not going to mention anything right now because I'm not receiving any type of compensation for promotions, but there are many tools out there that allow you to input the requirements that you have into schedules, and it will spit out the resulting shifts that you need for your operations. However, it's very important that your workforce team is also on top of these requirements to ensure they communicate with recruiting to ensure you're continuously hiring if your turnover is too high, so that you are able to ensure that you always have the number of agents that you need at every single moment. Scheduling is very important, and having requirements by itself will not cut it off. So it's very important you have a dedicated team or person in charge of these calculations to ensure you're never understaffed or you're never overstaffed. So now that you have finished with your schedules and you already went through the forecasting, calculation requirements, etc., now you get to face one of the most important and crucial things of the entire workforce management process, which is real-time analysis. And here's where many companies fail. Let's say you created a schedule and you determine that you need 20 agents at 11:30, but then you only need 10 agents at 12, and then again you need 20 agents at 12:30. This may occur in multiple companies in multiple industries due to the schedules of the people that are calling. So creating the schedules will allow you to send 10 agents on break or lunch at 12, so that you're able to have their availability later on when you actually need it. But what happens if the agents don't follow that schedule? And how do you know if they're following it? It could be simple for an operation that has less than 10 agents, but when your operation is already more than 20, it's really hard for you to navigate through it. You may have a supervisor and they may have a spreadsheet or a grid where they know what's the schedule of every single agent. But if a supervisor is stuck on a sub call or on a coaching session or a meeting or whatever, this person might not be on top of the schedules at all times. So what's going to happen is the agents may follow the schedule they want, or the agent may just simply ignore it because they don't want to follow it, or simply they forgot or they got distracted. So for you to be able to be successful at this, you need a tool that allows you to visualize the agent schedules and their real-time activities. There are a bunch of tools out there that connect with your dialer. It's capable of telling you this agent is on break, but it's supposed to be taking calls, or this agent is taking calls, but it's supposed to be on break. Or you can even give you alerts whenever an agent is taking too long on a particular call. These tools usually are independent to your call routing system or your telephone system, but there are other tools that are very innovative, that it's an all-in-a-box type of product that would allow you to have the real-time analysis module. But for this system to be successful, you need to have a dedicated person on top of this, not just to visualize and police if the people are actually following their schedules, but actually making decisions on the fly. For example, you were planning an absenteeism of 10%, and for whatever reason, the absenteeism spiked out to 15%. So you don't have all the resources that you need. So you got to take a decision whether you move break or lunches, or you cancel a training session, or you move it to the next day, or you add overtime hours. So all of these decisions, you're only capable of taking them if you have a system that allows you to visualize it, and you have your staff planning that allows you to know whenever you're going to be moving activities or whenever you're going to be planning activities. And somebody needs to centralize all this. Somebody or a team, depending on the size of your organization. Usually a good ratio is having one real-time analyst for every group of 75 agents. So when you're building your operations towards an inbound strategy, you need to ensure that you always have at least one person per shift visualizing what every single agent is doing and taking decisions on the fly to ensure efficiency. Now we're going to close the loop with reporting. So the important part about reporting is that you're going to evaluate every single segment that we already spoke about. So how do you evaluate your forecast? Well, you created a forecast for the month, for the week, for the day, and for the interval. And you may have been accurate on the month, on the week, on the day, but perhaps not the interval. Why? Because you may have thought that you were going to get more calls in the morning than in the afternoon, or vice versa, and you ended up overstaffed in one interval and understaffed in another interval. And this will create inefficiencies, will still burn out your agents, and will still create a bad customer experience for your customers. So you need to evaluate if your forecast was accurate or not. The easy part is, let's say your forecast was accurate and it was just deviated around 5 to 10% from the reality. But let's say in this scenario, your forecast wasn't accurate and you were deviated by 20%. Well, you got to analyze the reason why. Is your forecast wrong, or there was an unexpected cause or an unexpected situation that caused your forecast to be off? So for example, let's say your marketing team implemented a new campaign that boosted the volume by 20%. And you may have not considered this during your forecast. So maybe you don't need to change your forecast per se, but maybe you need to create a communication process in which your marketing team will alert your staffing team or your workforce team 1 month or 2 months in advance to be able to be ready for the seasonality or for the impact of this marketing strategy. If there was a new product launch, or if there was a general failure with one of the products your company is selling, all this communication needs to come over so that the workforce team can take a decision whether to hire more agents or to add overtime to a particular day or particular interval, or simply shift the schedules. Not all the time you're going to need to revisit the forecast and adjust it, but every single time that you miss it, you need to take into consideration if it was a miss because of a systemic issue in your forecast calculation, or if there was an element that was not considered that should be considered for the future. After analyzing the forecast, you get to analyze requirement calculations. And how do you do this? Let's say you plan for a 35% shrinkage, because usually your absenteeism is 15%, and then you have around 10% between coaching, breaks, lunch, etc. And then you have an additional 10% for unexpected situations like system issues or whatever. So for whatever reason, the shrinkage might have gone up or may have gone down. Let's say your operations team decided to implement a new bonus for attendance, and every single person that has 95% of attendance in a given month, they receive a special reward. This may decrease your shrinkage. So if your shrinkage historically is decreasing, then your calculation should also reflect it. Otherwise, you're going to be spending money hiring people you don't really need, or vice versa. If for a particular seasonality, let's say in December, you have more agents missing or more agents quitting, then you're going to need to hire in advance to be able to have enough agents to cover for that gap. So evaluating and measuring your requirements versus the reality is very important for you to be able to take decisions. Then the real-time analysis. You may have an agent or a supervisor on top of the schedules, ensuring the agents are following their schedule. But there's going to be an error always, because, for example, an agent hopped on a call that was supposed to take 3 minutes, but for whatever reason, it took 5. So the agent couldn't take the break at the time he needed to and took it later. So this is something that occurs a lot in the call center industry. Even though you have a workforce team in charge of reminding the agents to follow their schedules, they might not follow it at 100%, and there could be a variation of 10, 15%. Well, monitoring it and creating a post analysis will allow you to determine what's the schedule adherence your team brings on a day-to-day basis, and use this as an input for your requirements. So if for whatever reason you end up with a 20% out of adherence, then you're probably going to need to increase your shrinkage around 10% to be able to compensate for that 20% of out of adherence. So these calculations occur after the day closes, because this way you're going to be able to analyze every single factor that impacted your operation. Therefore, you'll be able to fine-tune your calculations to be more successful the next day or the next week. So now you have seen the full framework of workforce management. Whether you're managing a 10-seat team or a large organization that's looking to grow and expand, these 5 steps will guarantee that your company hires efficiently and organize your resources the best way possible to provide a good customer experience without bleeding money. Now, if you need more assistance, simply visit uplinkbpl.com, or if you're watching this on LinkedIn, send me a direct message and we can talk. Even if you're not ready to pull the trigger, or even if you don't really need a contact center to be outsourced by us, simply send me a message and I'm happy to point you in the right direction or give you advice on how to do this. And if you're very interested in the tool that I showed earlier that allows you to calculate your staffing needs, your requirements, calculations, and schedules, feel free to drop me a DM. I'll be more than glad to send it over your way, and we can have a friendly conversation on how this can help you reshape the way you organize your resources in your organization. And if you want a company that supports your growing operations, supports your contact center, and helps you grow at a lower rate, simply send us a message and be more than glad to send you a service proposal, and we'll take it from there.